Well, like the Super Bowl, the U.S. Senate was in overtime this weekend, and the American people will probably end up like the 49ers, losing. Yesterday, senators voted 67 to 27 to advance a $95.3 billion supplemental spending package that would primarily go to help Ukraine secure their nation's future in their war against Russia. It would also provide support to Israel and Taiwan. But what is missing? America's security. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He serves on the Senate Budget Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Johnson, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me on. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. You had a long weekend. Was any progress made?
Well, if you want to fund Ukraine, I guess progress has been made. Those of us who are trying to first focus on the catastrophe, the clear and present danger that is President Biden's open border policy, we're not winning the day from a standpoint of votes. Hopefully, we're winning some hearts and minds, and convincing more Americans that the top priority of the United States Congress and, quite honestly, the President of the United States should be the safety and security of Americans. As much as you may be sympathetic with the people of Ukraine, I think most Americans are. We need to first secure our own border, and unfortunately, that's something that's been thrown out the window here in the United States Senate.
Senator Johnson, we've seen and heard more information. As a senator, you have access to even more information that's classified. But we know that there are terrorist cells operating in this country. Many of them have come across our open southern border. America is at risk. I mean, the FBI director has said this under oath before both committees in the Senate and the House. How do your colleagues justify sending this money overseas to aid Ukraine in their security, but refusing to deal with our own?
I think one of the most depraved justifications is they say, well, this is really not going over to Ukraine. This is going to build up our industrial base. This is going to create jobs in your state. Again, whether you want to support the people of Ukraine or not, and I think most Americans do, the way to do it, from my standpoint, is not to send another $60 billion worth of funding that is going to fuel the flames of a bloody stalemate. What U.S. policy ought to be at this point in time is recognize the reality that Vladimir Putin will not lose this war. Russia has 4 times the population, a larger industrial base. They can produce 4.5 million of the 155 millimeter shells that they're sending 10,000 a day into Ukraine, destroying it, killing Ukrainians. This bloody stalemate has to end, and there's no strategy on the part of President Biden other than get $60 billion of money we don't have that's going to further plunder and mortgage our kids' future. So, again, there's concern for the Ukrainian people, but what about the concern that would say, let's stop destroying their country. Let's stop a war that is killing more and more Ukrainians. I mean, there is no rationale for moving forward at this point.
Senator, I want to play a clip of the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer earlier today. And I mean, this has to be spin, but I want to play this clip. Clip 9, please.
If we want the world to remain a safe place for freedom, for democratic principles, for American prosperity, then elected leaders need to put in the work to make that happen. We need to approve the investments that ensure our people's security, ensure the security of our partners, and prevent our adversaries from gaining an edge over us.
How does this provide security for our people when our southern border remains wide open?
I don't have a clue. We spend $880-some billion a year on defense, and now they want another $100 billion or so to, I guess, increase our security. It simply doesn't. The same justification was used in Vietnam, the domino theory. If we don't bomb the you-know-what out of the Vietnamese people, communism is going to spread all over the world. What was the result of 58,000 lives lost in Vietnam? What was the result in Afghanistan, of Iraq? What is the result in Ukraine? Just death and destruction. We need to rethink our policy. We need to retrospectively take a look at what our foreign entanglements have resulted in and be honest about it. Listen, I think America, we're the good guys. We send our sons and daughters not to conquer land, but to fight for other people's freedom. But we have to take a look at what has been the result of all of that. And we have to understand the other person's perspective as well. And at least respect it if you disagree with it, but at least understand why Vladimir Putin would send his own troops into Ukraine. Again, I'm not justifying it. I'm not. Right. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to understand this is only going to get worse every day that this war goes on. More Ukrainians die, more of Ukraine gets destroyed, which will have to be rebuilt. So this just gets bloodier and bloodier and more costly, with no end in sight and no strategy to get to come to a conclusion.
Senator Johnson, you've been very clear. You've been consistent your entire time in the Senate. I would describe you as an American first senator. I mean, we want to help those, our allies, but we got to help ourselves first. But I'm struggling. I'm with you. I think most Americans, when they see people fighting for freedom like Ukrainians, they want to help them if they can. But they realize we've got a serious problem here at home that we need to address. But when you look at what the Biden administration did in Afghanistan, what a debacle. Why all of a sudden, when Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer are all about Ukraine, it raises concerns among many Americans. They ran, tucked tail and ran from Afghanistan, but now they're wanting to spend U.S. dollars hand over fist in Ukraine.
Well, that embarrassing and dangerous surrender in Afghanistan is what emboldened people like Putin. You have to recognize that, and you also have to recognize that their open border policy, what a clear and present danger that is, and they're ignoring it. Now, unfortunately, Leader McConnell entered into these secret negotiations that resulted in a bill that was worse than doing nothing, but then that's hailed as a great bipartisan achievement that, just conservative Republicans turned down. Nothing could be further from the truth. Democrats want an open border. They caused this problem. All they were negotiating for was political cover, and unfortunately, Leader McConnell gave them that political cover. So our job is to point out really how flawed that bill was. The American people understood that. That's why that thing collapsed in less than 24 hours once it's light of day.
It did. You're absolutely right.
Our own border.
You're absolutely right. It did. And that's what's so disappointing, that this bill would not advance, this bill funding Ukraine, leaving our border wide open, would not advance without Republican support. And now you have some of your Republican colleagues, like Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, calling for House Democrats to maneuver procedures, a discharge petition that would work around the Speaker, who has said he's not going to advance this bill.
Well, the Democrats will be happy to take over the House. I just hope there aren't any Republican House members that will allow them to do so. Now, Speaker Johnson has a razor-thin majority over there, so he's going to have to work, long and hard to make sure that only a couple of his members don't side with Democrats, like 18 Republicans did here in the United States Senate. They have to insist. Again, there's a split in our party in terms of how much aid, how that aid would flow to Ukraine. I'm somewhere in the middle of that. But what I'm absolutely certain of, and this is what the House members have to be, is we have to secure our border first. That's what Americans expect. And no matter how much you want to help the people of Ukraine, help the people of the United States first. America has to remain safe and secure. And under Biden and the Democrats, it is not.
Senator, final question for you. This was the only leverage that I saw on the horizon that could enable Republicans to accomplish that. And now that's going away.
Well, that's spent. Unfortunately, again, that's what Leader McConnell blew. We weren't asking for a monstrosity of a Rube Goldberg immigration bill. All we wanted was some kind of enforcement mechanism to force President Biden, who wants an open border, who caused this problem, force him to secure the border. The only leverage we had was Ukraine, but that now that has basically been frittered away under the incredibly stupid negotiating strategy in secret, when the American people support us in trying to secure the border. It makes no sense. It's a political debacle.
Well, I'm certain that most of our listeners, if not all, support the stand you and your Republicans have, your allies have taken there in the Senate to secure our border first before we help anyone else. Senator Ron Johnson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Listeners have to let the House members know what the position needs to be. Secure America's border first.